how we all learn to hide it. Don't show the fire in your soul, just keep it inside. Yeah, keep it inside. Oh, hiding away in the darkness. Oh, but the sunlight, it fights to get in. Break down the walls that I built for myself.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the SONA Foundation's Fireside Chat. I'm very excited to be here today, actually in person, sitting across from our Backline partner, Tara Lopez. She is going to facilitate the conversation. We love these conversations. We've been meeting online, doing this for the last couple of years, and this is the first time that Tara and I have actually met each other in person. We are working side by side today, literally. So very exciting day for us here. Like I said, my name is Ariel Silver. I am the program manager over the SONA Foundation, and we are an organization created by songwriters for songwriters. We create programs and resources for songwriters and composers in mental health, financial wellness, and career development. And our monthly fireside chats are, of course, under the pillar of mental health. These have been really meaningful conversations. It's been such an honor to be a part of this program in partnership with Backline. I urge you to be on our mailing list if you are not already. The SONA Foundation is open to anybody. Just subscribe to the mailing list. You will find out about our programs. We have some cool upcoming things happening, including a wellness fest in person in Los Angeles. So that was rescheduled from a previous date, and keep your eyes peeled on the newsletter to find out when the new date is, especially if you're in Los Angeles. And we just came off of a really fantastic week with programs from the SONA Foundation and also our sister organization, Songwriters of North America. It was Warrior Week. We had the Warrior Awards, which is a very exciting event that really puts the spotlight on songwriters and honors songwriters. It was a fantastic night. And leading up to that was a whole slew of other events. Our Music and Money series, a special concert at Hotel Cafe featuring the songs of Desmond Child, who was in the room. It was just a whole lot of fun stuff. So I hope that you will, if you're not already, I hope you will jump on our mailing list. I'll make sure to put the link in the chat and also browse our website to see what else is going on. I don't want to delay anymore. We have a really interesting conversation coming up today on ADD, ADHD. This is a topic that has come up many times in our previous fireside chats, just as sort of a sidebar conversation. And so it's exciting to centralize that conversation and talk with our songwriter guests. And for this, of course, we have Tara, who I will bring onto the screen in just a second. She will be facilitating the conversation. I'll be moderating the chat. And because we're literally sitting across from each other, we're going to try to do a little banter at the end if we can, but I don't know if the technology is going to allow for that. So we'll see what happens at the end, but I will be right here listening in on the conversation. Can't wait. I'm going to take myself off the screen, bring Tara on, and we'll get started here.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, Ariel is going to be moderating the chat box, so please feel free to let us know where you're tuning in from, if you're a songwriter, and if you also have ADD, ADHD, we want to hear from you. So please let us know in the chat box. But if you don't know, I'm Tara Lopez. I'm the community manager and head of artist partnerships at Backline. Backline is a resource hub for the music industry. We provide free mental health and wellness resources for everyone in the music industry, from the artist to the manager, to the tour crew and family members. And we've teamed up with the SONA Foundation for this very special fireside chat to talk all about mental health for songwriters, and specifically today, ADD, ADHD, what both of those are, how it affects the creative process, and we'll also be breaking down some of the misconceptions and myths out there as well. So today we have some very special guests. Colin Scharf is a musician, filmmaker, audio engineer, actor, and more. He's been making music since his first punk band at age 15. And from music syncs with Netflix, Hulu, to producing over a dozen short films and music videos, to starting a recording studio, Colin continues to make waves within the industry. We also have Brian Amado Rauch. He's a singer-songwriter and one half of the folk pop duo Late Night Thoughts. Over the past 8 years, Late Night Thoughts has grown to over 400,000 monthly listeners, and living with ADD has helped shape his creative process as a songwriter, and I'm very excited to talk more about that today. And lastly, we have Backline Clinical Director Ari Jacobson. Ari continues to help grow Backline's clinical referral network, this year hitting record numbers. Very, very excited to share more about that later on this year. And as always, again, Ariel will be moderating the chat box, so please feel free to let us know where you're tuning in from. We want to hear from you. So we're going to get everyone into the chat. Hey, y'all, how's everyone doing today? I like to start the conversation off with a simple question.
Doing okay. Yeah.
Doing pretty great. Yeah. How are you?
Awesome. Thank you. Ari, how are you?
I'm good. Always excited as always to be here. So just happy to be a part of all this.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's dive into the conversation. And first, I'd like to start with Ari, because I would like you to break down what ADD and ADHD are, and maybe dispel some of the common misconceptions about both.
Sure. And this is something, as I always remind everybody, please, if you think that any of this relates to you, seek out professional help. This can be a suggestion as to some ideas that might be going on, but this should not diagnose anything. The first thing I want to mention is in the last, I'm blanking off the top of my head, let's say 5-10 years, ADD and ADHD have now become the same thing. So you might frequently hear about ADHD versus ADD. And nowadays, ADHD is just separated into two separate ones. Or really three. There's ADHD inattentive type, ADHD hyperactive type, and then there's an ADHD for combined, so you'll get both. In terms of what that really means is the inattentive type means you probably have trouble focusing on a lot of little things. The hyperactive side of it is going to be the kind of run and gun, kind of just always on the move. But ADHD is a neurodevelopment condition that really just, it's going to impact your attention regulation, your impulsivity, and then with that also like your activity and your energy level. But the real truth about it is it's going to impact all forms of your executive functioning. And then one of the misconceptions that people frequently forget about is that ADHD is also going to impact your emotional regulation. So how you're able to respond, especially in like impulsive and sudden type situations. The biggest thing is it's not just about a lack of focus. It's about a difficulty about regulating where your focus is. So you'll see a lot of people who struggle with ADHD are able to pay attention to things that they really love, things like video games or music or movies. But then when they're put in front of small tasks, ones that are mentally challenging or just not interesting, they really struggle. And the biggest misconception is that ADHD is laziness or a lack of discipline, but it's really an inability. It's a clinical diagnosis where your brain is just not able to actually focus. So ADHD really thrives on like novelty and challenge and creative energy, and kind of anything that's going to be opposite can really negatively impact or really cause people to really struggle to focus. There's a lot more to that, but a little bit.
No, it's great. I was taking notes because this is really interesting, kind of just understanding like the variations. And I want to go back to, you mentioned folks with either are able to maybe focus more on video games or music. And obviously for our conversation today, I'd like to know like how do they affect the brain's creative process?
Sure. So ADHD involves a whole bunch of different, like it involves differences in the way that you receive dopamine. So it's the chemicals that get released when you do something that you really enjoy, or something like eating a favorite food, playing music or playing in front of a crowd, getting that rush that you really enjoy. The differences really often result in like it can give you these bursts of intense creative energy, and then following that can be major fatigue or distraction. So what ends up happening is, to put it kind of simply, is the ADHD brain works more in a network of webs, so kind of like a spider web, and every point is going to lead to a different place, but eventually you'll get back to that end point. The non ADHD brain is going to work more in like a linear path, kind of like a highway. So in the creative space, the way the benefit really works is it really allows you to look at things from a lot of different ways and relatively quickly. The difficulty is that, if you think back to the old days of sitting in school where you're given a math test, that very linear, like 2 + 2 = 4, your brain's not as intrigued with it, so it's going to kind of bounce around, and just struggle to even lock in on what it wants to focus on. So it can really help produce a lot of creative. You talk to a lot of people who work in creative spaces, and it's not uncommon to talk to somebody who one of the ways that they harnessed their ADHD or their difficulty with focus was finding something they loved in composing or writing music or playing music. But at the same time, when you're put into a structured environment where you're told you need to do this, it can really put some delays and struggles because you're just not able to like harness that energy in that way.
Brian and Colin, I see y'all nodding along.
Yeah.
I would like to ask both of you, when did you first realize you might have ADD, ADHD, and how did that affect your understanding, or how did that shift your view of yourself?
Well, I was diagnosed, I suppose, like 2.5, maybe 3 years ago now, like officially diagnosed. But my wife is a therapist, and one of our friends is also a therapist. Also, Ari, everything you said, it's like, as you were sort of describing it, I'm like, oh God, it's like you're reading me over here. But yeah, as soon as I got sort of the official diagnosis, because my wife would say, you kind of have a little bit of symptoms of this, and our other friend Lindsay, who's also she's a psychologist, she would sort of say too, like, it kind of seems like you might have this, and then blah blah blah. Got the diagnosis, sort of went down that path. And then I think back all the way, honestly, Ari, you kind of mentioned like a math test. I was horrible in math. I was very, very creative. I would honestly, I remember like crying during math tests because it just didn't make sense. And they were timed math tests. And so I think back all throughout my life and I'm like, yep, that checks out. So there you go. I think that's kind of where I'm at.
I was diagnosed when I was 16. So it was like junior year of high school, getting ready for SATs and taking a lot of tests in school, and kind of similar to Colin, like they were just subjects where I struggled, especially in timed exams. And I would notice that I was really strong when I would do take-home essays, let's say, and creatively I was, sitting in a class, like thinking about the subjects, but then also writing an entire chorus to a song on the side. And I would get out of class and like be able to regurgitate the entire song that I just wrote in my head. But probably could not tell you a single thing that I learned about in the lesson.
Yeah.
And so, it was with the goal of, how can I kind of improve my performance in school? And I feel like I kind of grew up in maybe just the start of the generation where it was almost overdiagnosed. Kids were starting to take amphetamines, like regardless if they were diagnosed or not. My experience at the start was like I tried to take I think it was Vyvanse and like the lowest dosage possible, and it really like affected me in a negative way, gave me a lot of like anxiety and lowered my appetite. And so it was at the start, it was really difficult.
Yeah.
And Brian, I will just mention, because you actually just said two things that are, especially in like our generation of when the amphetamines Ritalin was first really coming up, and nobody really knew what the impact was going to be. But what you also tend to see, especially in younger kids, especially in school settings where not every kid is built to thrive in a classroom setting, that there's a very common misdiagnosis where anxiety is diagnosed as ADHD and ADHD is diagnosed as anxiety. And what you're really finding is that there's just people who struggle with ADHD and they're put into a situation like a classroom where they don't really feel as comfortable, the immense anxiety that they feel from being so uncomfortable. So then what happens is people then try to treat the ADHD either with medication or other kinds of treatment, and you're just kind of tackling the wrong disorder. And so that's where you see kids really struggling with some of that medication because they're not really struggling with the ADHD symptoms. They're so nervous that they're going to get, put into a situation that they can't thrive in. So especially with younger kids, you have to be very careful with misdiagnosing because they can look very much one and the same.
Mm-hmm.
Something else that I like on that topic of sort of a misdiagnosis or is it this or is it that? Like I feel like depression kind of sneaks in a lot for me more than I get anxious. And then if I can't do the thing that I am anxious about, which, like get to the, some creative thing, if I can't do it the way that I want to do it, then I plummet and I'm really depressed and I would get really sad. And so that was sort of like, oh, maybe he's just depressed or maybe he's anxious. But yeah, it all kind of circles around, I think, the ADHD kind of diagnosis. Yeah.
Colin and Brian, how does your ADD, ADHD show up in the songwriting process for you?
Yes, Colin and I met up early this week to talk through some of this stuff, but it's so interesting because when I'm like one-on-one in a songwriting situation, it's much easier. But as my career has gone on, part of the way that songwriters kind of get to know each other is in sessions. So you'll be in a session with 3, 4, even 5 people. I've done as much as 7 in one room together. Oh, and there's ideas just flying all around, and it's really difficult to focus and nail down which ones you're liking and which ones you're not. And maybe everyone liked one idea, but you didn't. But sometimes I feel like I'm holding the group back if I keep saying that I need to repeat something in order to really understand what it is. And so, yeah, it has been a challenge. And there's some awesome strategies that I've come up with personally to help with that. But it is something that I'm still working on. And sometimes I see it as like a really awesome superpower where, if everyone else is thinking about one thing, I can shift my brain to think about something else. But it comes with the other side of that where I feel like I'm less of a team player.
I might go up. I might agree with you on that team player thing. I have found so when it comes to songwriting for me, I'm generally writing songs for for the band that I'm playing in. We also have this sort of holiday rock and roll band that we put together, and my character for that sort of is a songwriter, and he writes songs for his partner, who's my wife, Laura. So if I'm writing songs, they're either for me to sing or for my wife's Christmas rock and roll character to sing. So what am I saying? Generally, I'm not writing songs like in the setting that you described, Brian. So I was kind of trying to think, as you were talking just now and when we met earlier this week, how has it affected me? And I think all I can kind of come up with is it will take me, sometimes the song comes out right away. Usually the music is just falls out. I pick up a guitar, go to the piano, bum, 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 20 minutes. I got a thing that I'm into. Lyrics, they can kind of plague me and sort of torment me. I'll get a good chorus line, and then it takes a month to knock out everything else. Sometimes it comes out all at once. And I feel like it's sort of like a perfectionism kind of thing or something where I'm trying, I have this idea and it has to be this way, and I can't make room for anything less than what I want it to be. And that, I think, spreads out across a lot of my different creative pursuits, with writing, with music, with some of the other things that I do. If it can't be the way that I see it in my head, then I get stuck, I guess. So maybe that's part of it too. Yeah, maybe that's part of the ADHD thing.
Brian, you mentioned seeing it as a superpower at times. And I'd like to ask, this is for both of you, are there moments when your ADHD feels like it enhances, and
Mhm.
obviously you said it did. So I'd like to know in what ways, if you can kind of expand on that.
Stuff. I like,
Yeah.
it's definitely it's less of a help than it is a hurt, I would say. But the times when it helps is like, a lot of times we'll start with the chorus of a song, and maybe we all didn't love it, but we move on anyway. And we get to the verse, and we're pointing to the chorus, we're talking about the lyrics for that, and everyone's like really focused on that, and my brain is still back there, and I'm able to then like kind of do both, and figure out like, oh, actually that could really, really help with the chorus. And if we just make this tiny switch there, then, we can have the verse be easier to work on. So I feel like those are the times when it really helps me.
Yeah. And I've heard that phrase, my superpower, and I'm glad that I just haven't ever quite felt like that. I've always have felt like, and Ari, when you were sort of describing, at the top of the chat here, like folks with ADHD, ADD, like not quite being able to fit into, say, like a 9 to 5 kind of world, or just anything that's a little more structured. I feel like it's the opposite of a superpower, for me, because I've always struggled. The handful of like full-time jobs, like 9 to 5ers that I've had, I'm just like showing up late. I'm like falling asleep. I'm like miserable the whole time, which is why I kind of became self-employed. So how does that interact with being a songwriter and being a creative? I think I always find a way to make time to be creative, and I always have. And thankfully, I'm now, like, this crazy story with my life this year, basically getting paid to be creative. Maybe more on that later, but it's like all the work that I put in, like, showing up late to work because I had to just get the rest of that song out, or I had to get the rest of that writing out. I had to finish the mix. I had to yada, yada, this and that, with my creative stuff has sort of led to where I'm at now, which is basically supporting myself because of my creativity. And I feel very fortunate for that. But in the songwriting context, I just struggle, with it being a power. I really feel like it's more just like it's like it makes me like determined, I guess, to finish things. Yeah.
Ari, for those that maybe don't necessarily feel like it's a superpower all the time or at all, how can songwriters kind of harness their creative strengths while managing it in a session or just throughout their day to day?
Sure. I think one of the number one thing is to just start off by really being self-aware about the fact that it's something that you're dealing with. So understand your own rhythms, your own general energy cycles, and also very much about like, what are your big triggers? What is going to distract you the most? When I was in graduate school, I knew that I couldn't go to the library to study because there's too much movement and going around. So if I ever did, I had to lock myself in a room with one window where I couldn't see everybody walking around because I just knew I'd be paying attention. Also with that, like, we all kind of have an idea of when we are at our best. Even with some of the worst ADHD symptoms, there tends to be a period of time during the day where you just feel your most calm or your most controlled. It could be the peak before the end of the day. So protect those times, making sure that you are scheduling times to write or to actually create during those times. And for many also, that's like first thing in the morning. If there's also ways to be like nowadays, as Brian was kind of saying, there's so many tools that exist now. So capture ideas in real time. If you're in the car and you're driving and something sparks a creative idea, use a voice note. You don't need to, all work doesn't have to be done like in this very formal setting. It's really a great idea to build into those less formal situations. And then also for any like formal type settings that you are using, use timers, use color coding. It takes a little bit extra energy, but then on the back end to know that you can go back and look at a list and go, I just need to worry about the blue list. It's going to help you use less energy than to have to go back and reorganize. And then really just the number one thing is like, you're not trying to fix the ADHD. We're not trying to fix the symptoms. We're trying to utilize them and work with them and even learn with them to maybe actually then create them into your superpower, where you can look at things from 10 different ways in 2 minutes when somebody else can't look at it that way. So it's how to harness that energy to be able to create your superpower rather than just kind of hoping that it like creates one for you.
Yeah, one of the biggest things that I found, and this kind of started with like a short anecdote that I heard about Ed Sheeran's producer, but he was saying that one day he just sat him down with some Legos and had him like building with Legos, and he said, "Okay, like spend time doing this and hum whatever you want to hum, and we'll see what comes out of it." And that's how I felt in class. And now there are times when, like, I'm doing work on my computer and I put on like the background noise is classroom background noise on YouTube. And it's like a 50-minute video where you can just like have something just kind of getting the background noise. I don't know how it works. Ari, you might be able to explain that better.
Yeah.
But it really helps.
Yeah, and I guess I'm just kind of did a little more thinking, because sometimes I like answer a question and then I'm like, oh wait, no, what am I talking about? So case in point, this past weekend, last weekend, my band had a music video shoot scheduled, and the video was sort of like elaborate. It involved renting a 1985 Firebird from some guy on Facebook Marketplace. We were going to give him a couple $100 to rent it for the day, like the iconic car that was sort of, it's referenced in the song that I wrote. 9:30 the day before, 9:30 p.m. the night before the shoot, the guy pulls out and just like ghosts us. And we're like, my drummer, my music, my partner, my drummer in the band and I were freaking out. He's running sound for a gig. I'm at a friend's house with my wife and her friends, and we're like losing our minds because this whole video is centered around this freaking car, right? And so I'm like pacing back and forth. I'm trying to find another car, and it just hits me, this whole new idea without the car. And we just rewrote the video in my head in like 6 minutes. And I feel like that is an example of, and then the next day during the shoot, we had to do a lot of like on location pivoting, like, oh shit, we can't get into this building. What do we do? Oh, I know what we'll do. So maybe that's where it turns into my superpower, is like that ability to like see an issue, see a problem, and very quickly problem solve without like tanking the shoot. So yeah, so I guess that's the superpower. Yeah. And
yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Ari, I'd like to ask you, what are some common challenges that you've seen with songwriters with ADHD, ADD, when it comes to structure or time management? Because Colin mentioned earlier, he struggled with the 9-to-5 kind of structure, or follow through even.
Yeah, it's really, really common that people who really struggle with ADHD are going to, and I'm going to use the word appear, to struggle to start and finish projects. They may pick up projects and then put them down, or start 10 different projects all at once and then not be able to get back to them. And the reason I say appear is because, again, it might just be the way that your creative brain is working, where you get an idea for this one song and then you get an idea for this one song, and your superpower is being able to have 10 different starting points and then eventually hone them down to something really good. It's very common that, especially for somebody who has ADHD, that once they actually lock in and feel like they're really like working and they're in a rhythm and flow, you might find what is just commonly referred to as like time blindness, where you'll look at your clock and be like, oh my gosh, 14 hours have gone by and I've been staring at a screen typing out on a Google Doc. Yeah. And so that can also be impactful in terms of like deadlines, where maybe you're working up to a deadline and then you realize that you missed it because you've just been so focused on whatever it is that you're actually doing. So where the lack of focus, then when you get focus, becomes hyper focus.
Yeah.
And then just also with that, somebody even kind of mentioned in the chat the idea of perfectionism. It's a very common thing with ADHD, because since your brain is constantly working, you're always looking and tweaking and seeing a different way that it could work. So it's this idea of perfectionism, thinking that you're going to get to this absolutely perfect point. And also commonly with songwriters or musicians that I've spoken to with this, you might find that somebody's had the most popular song of all time, and they're like, but there's that one part that I really, really didn't love, because 6 weeks later an idea popped into my head and I knew it would have been better. And like, that's very common, where it's hard to just like table an idea and put a project to the side and move on from it. And so the ADHD kind of brain is going to constantly go back to other things and go, did I actually finish that, or did I actually forget to fix something?
Yeah. Yeah, we've got, my band has our, we pressed our first full length to vinyl, and where I'm listening to it, just we had a listening party a couple of nights ago, and I put it on, and I'm like, God, because I got a bunch of arts grants over the past couple of years to help, sort of self-produce it, which was really cool. But then I'm listening back, and I'm like you just said, I'm like, oh God, I could have done some more vocal delay throws and this part, and really like enhance this section, and it makes you crazy because you can't go back. It's on wax now, but still, it's like, yeah, that feeling hits me so often, and it sucks.
Colin and Brian, you mentioned earlier, especially when you're collaborating with multiple songwriters in the studio, you mentioned that you have found some strategies that have been helpful. What tools or habits have helped you stay focused during writing sessions or studio time that you'd like to share?
Biggest one, number one, phone's got to be on Do Not Disturb. We have it right next to us the whole time, and it's constantly recording. But one text or notification can like send you into oblivion. So the most important thing is, just creating a focused space where you can tune out distractions. And that means, making sure that your phone isn't, like taking you down. Because it's supposed to be a tool that helps you. If it's recording and maybe you're writing lyrics, like don't write the lyrics on the phone. Have a notepad where you're actually writing it out, on paper, and that's really helped me. And then the other biggest thing that I would say is kind of understanding roles. So a lot of different songwriters have different strengths. There are top liners who are, really good at melody. There are lyricists who are amazing at coming up with the next line. There are people who are just there to do the tracks or just there to do, production stuff. And whatever it is, I think it's really important to come into a room knowing the strength of each writer and how everyone can contribute in their own way. And that doesn't mean that, you're subjected to only do that thing, but maybe, you take someone's advice a little stronger if you know that their experiences and their strength is in this particular thing.
I used to do yoga a lot. There was a yoga class that we would go to on campus here in town. A friend of ours was the instructor, so she got us in for free, this whole thing. And there was a nice little studio here in town as well. And I would, we would go maybe twice a week or so. And I always found like Shavasana, like the very end of the practice, you're kind of laying there like you're all cooked, If I was stuck on something earlier in the day, it would just come to me. It just like this, like, here you go, sort of gift. And one thing I miss, I guess, is since the pandemic, the yoga studio in town sort of moved, it closed, this and that. But that is something that I try to get back to, I guess. I hope I'm answering the question. I feel like this was in my head. Okay, yeah. During the process, yeah, like tips and strategies, I guess. Like if I'm stuck on something, I just try to get up and walk around, and more often than not, I'll like go in the kitchen and like do the dishes, and then suddenly, oh, that's the line, or that's the next bit. Yeah, I think you have to get away from it for a little bit if you're feeling, again, stuck on a section. I also highly agree, Brian, with you about turning off the phone, do not disturb, all of that. Mine's on do not disturb right now, and for some reason my buddy cut through it. I'm like, no, Tyler, don't call me right now. But my first apartment that I had when I moved out here, I didn't have the internet, and then my now wife and girlfriend, she moved in, and she's like, why don't you have the internet? Then I said, because if I have the internet, I'm never going to write a single word. I was in school for creative writing at that time. And then we got internet, and my like just Facebook, So distraction-free environments are, if you can find them, like make them precious.
And the other thing that I learned, so I worked with a really great executive functioning coach in college. His name is Dr. David Murphy. I'm just going to shout him out because he was amazing. He has his own company called Effective Effort Consulting. And the biggest lesson that I learned from him was prioritization and something that he calls eating the frog, where, often I think it's different for everyone with ADD or ADHD, but whatever it is, if you feel like you're best handling the most difficult tasks first and then moving on to the easier tasks, or doing the easier task first so that it kind of helps you like get in a flow, and then dealing with the difficult tasks, finding out which strategy works best for you is so important. And I like my daily practice is creating a to-do list and then reprioritizing that to-do list every single day so that I know like what I'm going to be able to tackle. Oh, David's here. Awesome.
Yeah, I was going to say, we got a shout out from David Murphy. He's listening now and so proud of you. That's so cool.
That's awesome. Thanks, David.
Love that. Love that.
Yeah.
Eating the frog. I'm gonna look that up later. That's really cool. Ari, we've heard kind of what works for Colin and Brian. How can songwriters learn to work with their ADD, ADHD rather than against it?
So I love this idea. I've never heard of eating the frog, but I love it. It's such a good concept. It's, you have to break up your task into micro deadlines and micro goals. If I just tell you to go be famous, it's such a broad, it takes so many steps, and like at what point do you actually know if that's accomplished or not? So if you can say, okay, for me to even be famous, then I have to create a skill. I have to practice. By practicing, I have to dedicate 10 minutes a day. And break it down so you're actually checking off those little boxes. It's going to allow you to actually see the motivation that you're finishing things and then hopefully stay on track. With that, also making sure that if you have a deadline, not just saying everything has to be done by Sunday. It's let's focus on this one piece, it's done by Thursday, another piece, it's done by Saturday, and then really holding yourself accountable with that. And then Brian, you also mentioned just the idea of like writing with other people. I'm a big fan of having external accountability. In ADHD, we kind of refer to this as like body doubling, which is actually like physically putting somebody else in the other room with you, because when you see somebody else focusing and working, you will match. When you feel like you need somebody to bounce some ideas off of, you will match. I wouldn't necessarily recommend 7 or 8 people in a room with you. That sounds overwhelming in general.
Excessive, yeah.
But 1 or 2 people that you really trust that will also say like, hey, you need to get back to what you're doing. And especially people who like balance your weak spots. So body doubling with somebody who has very great focus. They can sit and just be very calm and like very collected during the whole thing. And then honestly, just reward yourself for small wins. It's really hard to get up and accomplish a task no matter how big or small it is. And don't just assume and give yourself credit that you did it because you were supposed to. Like, you set yourself a task, you stayed on task, and you accomplished it. So congratulate yourself, give yourself a walk around the block, give yourself an M&M or something that's going to give you a little bit of dopamine, and then set the next small task and just keep going.
I really love that. And that actually leads me to a question that I've been kind of wondering throughout this conversation. Colin and Brian, how do you practice self-compassion on days when your ADD, ADHD makes things feel just harder?
I will say that I'm that I think my wife, again, I mentioned she's a therapist, so she's always, if I'm like I'm kind of getting down on myself and just kind of griping and trotting around the house, she's like, say 3 nice things about yourself, say them out loud and say them right now. And I'm like, okay. So I kind of hem and haw over that, but that's one little thing that she kind of that I try to do. And then I also just try to go like, okay, let's pull out, like, what are you doing and what have you accomplished? And like, if 15-year-old me, 14-year-old me were to see, I turned 40 earlier this year, 40-year-old me and what I've done, like, God, he'd be like going, how the hell did you get there? That's so cool. So I try to like get a little bit like macro view of myself, and that makes me feel a little bit better. But then I still feel like I still got work to do,
Yeah, I feel like this is part of that like superpower, not superpower thing I was talking about. Like, I don't really have great coping mechanisms for like the self-doubt and like being hard on myself. And because of that, I feel like anytime I don't succeed, I have a tremendous chip on my shoulder to then go into the next session the next day and really, knock something out. And that can really help me. And there have been so many times when, I'll have, 2-3 days in a row where nothing good is coming out. And then I'll be, like not able to sleep, and I'll think of something at 2 a.m. And that'll be the thing that, really carries the next write.
Mm-hmm.
A question maybe for all of you, but what kind of support or accommodations have helped you thrive in this industry, in an industry that has deadlines and pretty severe expectations and is, just a go, go, go type of environment? Or what do you think is needed for you to thrive?
I really benefit from deadlines. I remembered that was in the last thing we talked about. Like currently, every Halloween sort of month, every October for the Halloween month, every year for the past, like since 2017 or so, I've pitched it to the local paper to write like a 2-part, 3-part, 4-part scary story that they run, kind of like a serialized thing. And the deadline, this is just like a case in point. The deadline for okay, it's due Tuesday night by 11 o'clock. You got to hand this into the editor. Okay. So last night earlier this week, I'm hammering out draft 1 or part 1 and got it in. And I work so well with deadlines, but if there's no deadline, I'm cooked. I'm just like, well, I'll get to that at some point. If there's a show coming up, we got a new song that we're working on. I will do everything I can to get that new song ready to go for the next show. That's kind of another thing for me in songwriting is like, book a show, let's write a new song, let's get a new song out that we can play at the next gig. But without gigs on the books, without deadlines for any, again, creative pursuit that I have, which is a handful, I just kind of float. Sometimes I don't do anything because I don't have anything, I got nothing on the calendar. So deadlines.
Okay.
Deadlines are a big one. Yeah, I agree, Colin.
Yes.
I think, and now I'm kind of seeing it for the first time where like my band, we're kind of in this weird stage where like we're about to release a bunch of music, and our management team was like, okay, now we need you to like start working on the next record like while you're releasing all this stuff, and it's so tremendously difficult to focus on the next thing when you're in the middle of such an important thing that's right in front of you. But it's so important that we get to that next stage, and sometimes it's hard to see what the deadline is, but you just have to make them for yourself. And that's really important. And sorry, can you repeat the first part of the question that you asked?
Honestly, just what kind of support or accommodations have helped you within the industry?
So I think Allie Washington, Allie from Minneapolis, she wrote something about being sober. I do have to say, like in the music industry, it is there are a lot of scenarios where during a session someone will pop open a drink, someone will go out to smoke. Like there are so many instances where that happens, and that's a really difficult thing to work with sometimes, and can be a distraction. And I feel like that's kind of one thing that the business could work on, is like creating spaces where like the sobriety is not like a problem, or not, maybe not a problem, but like not the minority.
Right. Yeah.
We're talking about sobriety then. Yeah, that's a real issue. Yeah, it's like, man, if I can just like keep it cool, then our creativity is just. But if you get on a little bit of a streak, it's like, ooh, I kind of. And I think that's a lot. I think that's a big part of having like ADHD, is like kind of get a little more drawn to those dopamine rushes, and 5 o'clock rolls around and it's like, oop, So that's something that I'm moving towards seeking some support for. I suppose we can phrase it like that.
It's definitely, there's a big factor in terms of finding a dopamine rush that you can get that is not going to come from some external substance. So whether it's honestly like sunlight, just going outside and standing and letting sunlight hit you, whether it's a food of some sort, it's an exercise, being able to replace that dopamine hit's going to be really important. And especially with the ADHD, it's a consistent reminder. So it's something that feels relatively consistent. You know what it's going to feel like. So it's an easy thing to rely on. And then also just with ADHD, kind of trusting your own unreliableness. So knowing that your focus is not perfect and your attention span in many cases is probably not at its best and your organization may not be at its best. So I set reminders for myself. I have lists that set reminders, and the reminders may drive me absolutely insane sometimes, but the biggest thing is having my own accountability. So if I miss a deadline, I can't say nothing reminded me, I didn't have a partner to remind me of. It's no, I ignored 14 reminders over the course of the last 30 days, and I should have been able to I need to hold myself accountable, because especially if I'm doing something that fits into like not a 9-to-5 job, then there has to be that accountability to make sure that you're not, going to end up back into something like a 9-to-5. So it's very important to hold yourself accountable and to put yourself in a situation that is going to allow you to succeed. Because if you just feel like you're failing all the time, then you're not going to keep trying.
Yeah. What's that saying? It's, the first step to solving any problem is acknowledging that there is a problem.
Yeah.
Ari, for folks listening, what forms of therapy or interventions have you found to be most effective for creatives with ADD, ADHD?
Very standard therapy practice would be a cognitive behavioral approach. It's probably a very common one that people have heard of, especially when probably about 10 years ago it was probably the most commonly used therapy approach, because it's big about finding inconsistencies in behaviors and thoughts and implementing coping skills whenever your triggers were. So you know that you're going to be distracted at the library. Instead of going to the library, you're going to implement a coping skill to avoid it. That the biggest thing with that is if you have the intent about really being focused on making sure that you're figuring out your triggers, you're finding your best coping skills, you're exploring them, it can be really effective. But for somebody who maybe is a little less motivated, or maybe doesn't necessarily have the time to explore coping skills, it can be a little bit more difficult. Actually what Brian was saying, the idea of like executive functioning coaching, or just like ADHD coaching, many cases it's not necessarily about going through a therapy practice of learning how to live with this disorder, but rather learning how to build practical systems for scheduling and focus and accountability. So you're kind of being taught how to accept rather than fight your symptoms. And then it's always a hot topic. Some people approve, some people don't, but if you're really struggling, you need to explore the idea of just what your options are for something like a medication. The wrong medications are not going to work, but the right medications can be wildly effective. So finding a prescriber that you really trust, who you're willing to kind of work with, and understand that unfortunately in the world of psychiatry, the first medication may not be the perfect one. So being patient with yourself and giving yourself a little bit of grace to also say like, what I want this medication to help me with is not working, or it is working. And then finally just, adapting your lifestyle too. A therapist I know has always said that for ADHD, she kind of focuses around what she calls the big five, which are exercise for focus, protein, sleep, keeping a stable calendar, and building a strong support network. So if you can build those 5 things around you, then the other pieces can kind of fall into place for you.
Well, I know that we have to wrap up soon, so I'd like to ask you, Colin and Brian, if you could give one piece of advice to maybe songwriters tuning in, or who will tune into this conversation, who are navigating ADD, ADHD, what would it be?
Go first. I need to think.
Sure. Okay. So this is where my head's at. I have a little studio, a recording studio, and there was one client I had a couple years ago. pretty severe ADHD, medicated for it as well, the whole thing. But boy, that boy, he would have an idea and he would just, it needs to be exactly like this. It needs to be exactly like it is in my head, or we have to start over, or you know what I mean? It was like kind of frustrating to work with. And I know that I have those tendencies as well. So noticing that about myself and more severely in that former client, a piece of advice maybe doesn't have to be perfect. Just get it on the page, get it out into the world. It's better to hear the song in the room than it is to hear it in your head. So
Love that.
And that's awesome. I think honestly, my biggest piece of advice, because it's the thing that's helped me the most, is find like Ari had been talking about, body doubling is so important. Find someone that you trust, that you can work with. I'm so lucky to have met my closest writing partner and the other half of my duo partner in college. So as long as I've been like professionally writing music, we've been doing it together, and he knows all of my weaknesses and all of my strengths. And having someone that really like understands like every different part of you is just so important to be able to express yourself in the most natural way. And yeah, so that would be my biggest recommendation is find a partner that you really trust.
I want to thank you all so much for sitting down and having this conversation. I think you can see the chat's kind of going off, which is great. I think a lot of folks resonate with your experiences, and just really want to thank you all, Colin, Brian, for sharing your experiences, and Ari, as always, for sharing your expertise. So thank you so much again for being a part of this fireside chat. We're really grateful.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I'm going to sign off and let Ariel take over, but want to thank everyone so much for tuning in to this month's Fireside Chat.
This is the time when Tara and I typically get to talk with each other and reflect back on the conversation. And Tara, you're sitting right across from me. I was wondering, I don't know if my microphone is going to pick up on this, but I wonder if we can do this a little bit, because I am really curious about what you were thinking as our guests were talking about their experiences. I definitely had a lot of thoughts about my own processes, my own mind, how it's working. So I wonder if this will be too weird if I turn this.
Let's see.
There we go. Okay. There's Sarah.
We are literally right across from each other. I was thinking that honestly, all of these practices could be utilized and put into place for any songwriter. I would think that all of it would benefit. A lot of what Colin and Brian were saying and expressing about how their brain works, it resonated a lot with me. But I also was thinking like the prioritization and the body doubling, I thought was really fascinating. And kind of, I was, taking notes as to how can I incorporate some of these practices into my day-to-day or into my creative process.
Yeah.
What were some of your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll turn it back around here. One of the things that I wrote down in my notebook while you all were talking was, I said, why don't you try creating some deadlines?
Yeah.
Because I'm a literary writer and a songwriter, and I constantly, like, I think you and our guests as well, I have a lot of projects that are at varying degrees of completion. And then I forget about them. And then I remember it, right? Like, it's like, it comes back around. I'm thinking of that old Ani DeFranco song, the Little Plastic Castle. Oh, there's the castle again. Like, just a fish swimming around in the bowl. And I was also thinking though, I love that we have these mental health programs. I love that we have these conversations. I'm grateful to my own therapist. I'm so grateful for this whole field, but also I find myself frequently wondering, is it helpful to name it, or is it helpful just to learn as the individual, what are my challenges and how do I figure it out? And maybe by naming it, we open up resources. So, it kind of cuts to the chase. Like I can Google ADHD. What are some strategies? Maybe the labeling is helpful. I don't know. What do you think? And I was also wondering if Ari is, I don't think still here. So I won't try to pull him back up, but we'll turn the camera this way.
I definitely also found myself, when things would resonate, internally questioning, oh, maybe I have ADHD.
Yeah.
Do I want to go down that route and try to figure that out? Which there was some hesitation there. But I do think identifying and naming is so important for a lot of folks, like you said, because it opens up the door to resources, maybe to also like getting the proper help, but then also maybe just kind of having more self-compassion for oneself. But I also understand if folks are hesitant to label themselves or go further down that route. So it really, I think, just depends on someone's comfortability and willingness. But for me, while it does resonate, there was a part of me that was like, okay, I don't want to go down there just yet, but I do want to put into my day some of those practices and see, especially the deadlines. It's so funny that the word deadline or routine, I was so hesitant to in my 20s. And now I'm like, give me all the deadlines, give me all of the routine to try to meet, some of the creative projects that I want to put out into the world.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, throughout this whole conversation, I found myself sort of reflecting back on my history, my time in school, and also wondering, I mean, our guests for this particular fireside chat, we had 2 men. And I've heard many women say that their experiences are different and that the traditional or the historical diagnoses for ADD, ADHD, or ADD really, I think is like that that hyperactive part is not reflective in a lot of young girls' experiences necessarily. And so they didn't get the resources that might be out there for ADD, ADHD. And for example, just last month in our fireside chat, we were talking with, in our conversation with our guests, this topic came up, and there was a moment in the conversation where it was like, oh yeah, I was diagnosed as an adult. As a girl, I had these challenges, but it was an undiagnosed ADD situation because I wasn't exhibiting the same, behavioral, markers, I guess, that the boys might have been showing. Yeah, I don't know. This was a really fascinating conversation, and somebody in the chat box even mentions that, these strategies, I think it was Patty Drew. I'm going to pull this up for a second. The thoughts and tools, especially helpful to those with ADD, ADHD, could be really useful to anyone for anyone to integrate.
Yeah.
And I thought that's exactly what I was thinking throughout this whole conversation. I have no idea where I fall in terms of this particular diagnosis, but I really resonated with a lot of the things that the guests were saying and a lot of the tools.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I have a lot. This conversation is leaving me with a lot to think about and a lot to reflect on.
We'll be hanging out all day.
Yeah.
Right? All right. So I'm just going to leave the camera this way. Thank you so much for everyone who popped into the chat box. It was really lovely to read your own reflections on your own lived experiences. we over here at the SONA Foundation and over here at Backline, I know that these fireside chats have been, real bright lights in the course of a month. They have allowed these kinds of nuanced and deeper dialogues about these experiences that so many of us have, or we know people who have them. It just like um, helps open my mind, I know for sure, every month. So thank you to the guests. Thank you to Backline. Thank you, Tara. And thank you, Ari. We are going to be back next month in November for another fireside chat. So I hope that you will join us typically on the third Thursday of the month. In fact, I think that's been pretty solid for a while now. So third Thursday of the month, Therapy Thursday. And until then, we will hopefully see you online and on the SONA Foundation mailing list. So take good care, and I'll see you next time.
The sunlight, it fights to get in.